Hi, welcome back to Open Hand Farm. Today I am going through my seeds, and I actually started this yesterday. My friend Sheridan is going to garden with me. I think I've told you that before. We started going through seeds to see what needed to be planted when. So we already started our onion seeds and they are doing great. I start a lot of seedlings. All of the plants I grow, I start from seedlings. So what I've done in the past is I look at the back of the seed packet, and most of them will tell you when you need to start the seeds. So this one says for these Isis candy cherry tomatoes, it says start indoors 6 to 10 weeks before last frost. So to figure out the frost dates, you can search just frost dates, and then it comes up and shows the 2023 first and last frost dates at the Old Farmer's Almanac. And you'll click on that, and they'll have you put in your zip code. Then you'll see right here that the last spring frost should be around April 16th. And the first fall frost will be October 22nd. Some seed packets will tell you how many days it takes before this seed is ready to harvest. So you could count from your last frost date to your first frost date to make sure you're even going to be able to plant that seed. And if your seed packet doesn't tell you, look it up on the internet. It will let you know. All you have to do is search whatever you're looking for. And basically, you can search just tomato. It doesn't have to be this variety, or carrot, or cabbage, or whatever. So if you have a short growing period, I would do that before I plant something, because you want to make sure you have enough time. You don't want to go all the way through growing this big, beautiful plant, and then just as you're about to harvest from it, a frost comes and kills it all. So that's what I would suggest doing. So after I have that information, I can figure out when to start these seeds. My last frost date, I'm going to look at this new calendar. That's last year's calendar. And my last frost date, it said April 16th. So I'm going to circle April 16th and put last frost date. From there, I will count backwards. So this says plant indoors 6 to 10 weeks before the last frost date. So from here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would be the 5th of March. But if I want to go back 10 instead of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That would be the 5th of February. Now let's see what I've done in the past. That's why I like having these calendars. It lets you know what you've done, and you can make notes as to whether or not that was too soon to plant something in your area or too late to plant it. All right, let me find tomatoes here. And I think last year I did start them later, and they worked out very well. Okay, last year I started my tomato seeds on the 29th. So let's see how many weeks that was from the 15th, I believe was my last frost date last year. So that was 1, 2, 3, only 3 weeks before my last frost date. But let me tell you why that is. And again, another good reason to keep these. When I plant 6 weeks before the last frost date, what happens is they grow tremendously. And then they're like this big when they go in the ground. And some of them die on me. They get too leggy. They get root bound, even though I have to transplant them, which is another thing. You have to transplant them 2 or 3 times before you put them in the ground. I didn't want to do that. So last year, I started them much later because you don't put the tomatoes in the ground right after the last frost date. They're still going to keep growing because you wait until May to put them in the ground so that it's nice and warm. Let's see when I put them in. May 5th. So that is giving them an extra 2 weeks to grow before I put them in the ground after the last frost date. So that means that I have them growing for 6 weeks before I put them in the ground. And that worked last year. I might start them a week earlier. I know some of them were a little smaller, but they were still like this big. It's not like they were like this. They were still very big plants, but they weren't this big. So this is why it's so important to have some way of knowing what you have done in previous years, or if you're new at this, keep track of it, because you will rely on what you did last year to decide what you do next year. Now, I also have this journal, and while we're talking about tomatoes, let's go to my tomato sheet and see what notes I made last year about them. Okay, the cherry tomatoes, I started indoors 3/26, so I wrote that down here, and I planted them outside on the 5th. So that would mean I would start them a week sooner. And I've got some other work going on here in the garden on the 21st. So I'll just go ahead and say I'm gonna start them that day. You don't wanna have work to do every day of the week in the garden. Sometimes you need to. So I'm gonna write start tomatoes in 2023. And that way, when I transfer information from this calendar to this calendar, I will know the changes that I wanted to make. It's so helpful to have previous year's information. Now, I said that you don't want to have something different to do every day of the week because other things just need to be done too. But what these different things are, as what I put on my calendar is, this one was I needed to start refrigerating some plants because they required cold stratification. So that was put stuff in the refrigerator. This one was plant these things in the ground that I had already started the seedlings of. This one is start more seedlings. And this one is direct sow into the ground the seeds for these items. So I do have 4 different days that I'm doing things, but there's not a lot. So I can step out, do that, and be done for the day. Or if you wanted to, you could just put all of this stuff maybe on Wednesday and just spend a whole day doing all the things that needed to be done. However it works best for your schedule. These plant dates, start dates, whatever, they don't have to be that exact day. As long as they're within the week or so. And honestly, I have gone without planting my garden for probably a month. And I just keep watering the plants. They get long, they get leggy, but they work. Life just happens. And sometimes you just can't get it done. So don't beat yourself up if you think, oh, well, I should have already started those. Forget it. Start them, try it. And if they don't make it, you know what to do next year. This year, I'm going one step further because I don't know about you, but sometimes I forget to look at calendars. What Sheridan and I started the other day is to take the information from the calendar. So we started with February because we've already done our planting in January, which was the onion seeds. So we start with our February calendar, and on the 4th, which this year would be the 3rd, we had a list of things that we needed to start. Now, some of these things I'm not starting because I already have them established in the garden. That is the best thing about perennials. If you can plant perennials, do it. So I usually, this time of year, because I copied this from last year's calendar, would start calendula flowers. I would start cosmos flowers. I could start echinacea and thyme and yarrow. You guys, I planted those the last few years and they just keep coming up. I don't need to plant them this year. So that's 4 or 5 seeds that I don't have to start growing. It's wonderful, and they'll just come up. And let me tell you, they come up big. Like, they show up. They don't just shyly come. They are there to stay. So that is a blessing. If you can plant perennials, do it. What we do need to plant on that day, though, we put them all in a Ziploc bag, and we put the date on them and said, start the seeds. So I will put this probably in the front of here. I will put all of these bags, and each day I'll just kind of glance and be like, okay, because after I plant this one on the 3rd, I'll fold up this baggie and save it, use it next year, and the next one will be showing. So I will see that. And if I just glance over, I'm like, oh, the 13th. Okay, that's when I need to plant those. But again, if I see it and I look at my calendar and I say, oh, I'm really busy on the 13th, that's not going to work, then I can choose to do it on the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. It's okay if it's not on the exact day, but you want it within the week. That would be perfect. So that's what we did. We have all of our Februarys done. And then we started our Marches, but then Sheridan had to leave for a while, so I told her I would just keep going. So I'm just gonna kind of do the next one and let you see what I'm doing. All right, I had told you that I started my tomatoes on the 29th of March last year, and that I was gonna go back a week and do it then. Well, that would be the 22nd or throughout this week. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a bag that says March 21st, because that's the date this year that if I go back a week, that's the date, 21st, and start seeds. So now I'm gonna take all the tomatoes, which we sat and kind of talked about what tomatoes we wanted and how many types we would want for different purposes. And we have several types that we're planting. We're doing an Amish paste, a real hearty, stout paste tomato to make sauces and things like that. I also have the San Marzano because it is amazing for sauces, but I love it because it's a drier tomato and you can fire roast it very, very well. You can throw them on and they're like a pepper. They just blister up very nicely and there's very little moisture inside and they're great. I have heard people on other videos say that the best ever tasting tomato was the Pink Brandy Wine. So for my new tomato for the year, because it seems like every year I try a new one, I got the Pink Brandy Wine. So we'll plant a couple plants of those and see how that goes. Then we have my two favorite, which are the Paul Robeson and pineapple. They are so good. These are just the slice and eat or put on a sandwich or however you want to eat them tomatoes, right off the vine like an apple. whatever you want to do, but they are really, really good. Then of course I have the cherry tomato, the Isis candy cherry. And I planted these last year along with another cherry tomato. This was amazing even before they were ripe. When they just started getting some color, you could pick them up and they were so sweet and good. So I'm only planting these cherry tomatoes this year. So I'm gonna put all of these in this bag. I can get it open. And I will add it to the pile and just keep working. I have new seeds that I'm working from and I have old seeds. So I will just keep going through my calendar. I have February and March done. In April, there's a lot going on, as you can see, because the frost date has happened. So a lot of things can go in the ground at that point. But we also have to harden things off. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I'm just gonna throw it out there right now very briefly. When you start your seeds, if you have never started seeds before, you start them, they grow, and then it's like, yes, I wanna put them outside. Well, they are used to being inside, either under grow lights or in a greenhouse. And when you put them out in that direct sun, it cooks them. It blisters them. Their leaves turn white from sunburn. So what you have to do is called harden off your plants. So you will take them outside for just an hour or so one day, then bring them back in. Then the next day you take them out, and cloudy days are the best to start with. And then the next day you put them out and you leave them more hours. So this is like a week-long process. You just keep increasing the number of hours in the sun until you can leave them out all day. So what happens when you're doing this is the leaves of your plant will get thicker. The sun causes a reaction in the leaf that thickens it so that it can handle that sunshine. And then you can plant them in the ground and not worry about them dying from heat stroke. So if you're starting seeds, don't forget that step, because all of this work will be in vain if you don't harden them off before you put them in the ground. So after I get this done, because Sheridan and I are working together, I want her to know what we're doing. These will obviously be at my house. So I'm going to type up a list of the dates and what we need to put in the ground and send that to her. So if I get that done before I publish this video, I will show you what that looks like. And that way, if you are in zone 6B, then you could use that same list if you want to. But if you're not in zone 6B, you'll need to look and see when you need to plant your plants. Look on the back of your packets, look it up online, make sure and find your frost dates, and just don't let anything hinder you from trying. I am so glad you're here today. And if you're new here, I am really glad to have you. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I'm gonna get all this finished up so that I can let Sheridan know what we're up to. So until next time, blessings on you and yours.